Yeah.
Good. Shall I come this side? Is that easier? Okay. We started?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so these are some tips or unpacking the stand before you, so you make sure you hit the key points. You're going to be doing 2 logs. In the 2 logs, you are going to be doing this process twice. Okay, and in page 29 of your Puka Puka Mahi, what you've got is you've got the scaffold and the structure that you should do it under. Okay. In the actual assignment itself, you've also got some sentence starters that are different to the ones on 29 to keep your writing varied and interesting, okay? So it's about trying to improve your literacy. However, the key things that you need to make sure you do is in the what section, you need to identify the risks or risks you are trying to minimize and why the risk is important to minimize to the effective functioning of the group. So if you say you're going to be talking about hypothermia as a risk that you are going to be trying to minimize, you must talk about, 1, what hypothermia is, symptoms of hypothermia, and how that might affect the person and the group. Okay, so it's always coming back to the group. And I'll jump to this part here. It's always important to start with I but end with us. So you're talking about how you implemented something, even if it was the whole group. For example, if you were involved in doing the RAMS form, it was a group work thing, however you were part of it. So you say, I helped in the RAMS form process when we were looking at the bike RAMS form, the mountain biking RAMS form, and then end with the us, so talking about how the things affected the group. In the how and why section, you need to explain how and why each leadership strategy you used was applied. Give clear examples where you can from either pre-camp or during camp. Alright? Explain how and why each strategy is relevant to the risk you are trying to minimize and how it will improve the functioning of the group. Okay? So when it says relevant, what it really means is how it's going to minimize that risk. Why is it a good leadership strategy to use for that risk? Okay? And how it will improve the function of the group. I can't stress enough, it always needs to come back to the group. Start with I, end with us. You then must evaluate that outcome. So this is coming in towards your so what section. So to evaluate, we need to look at the positives, negatives, and improvements, and making judgments. If we go to these judgments, positives and negatives, and improvements must be coherent. Remember that word coherent. I can't stress that enough too, is that, for example, an example of coherency, if you're talking about using, let's say, democratic leadership up in here, and you start talking about the positives of action planning here with no reference to democratic leadership, that's not coherent. All right, that doesn't make sense. Likewise, if you talk about improvements, you can't be talking about the positives and the negatives of democratic leadership and then start saying, well, next time I would make sure I wear the right socks, because it doesn't make any sense. So make sure it's coherent. The other thing is you must also, in terms of your improvements, talk about ongoing changes that you made during or in action. That's before and during camp. So that's what you must show, but also you can talk about future improvements based on your negatives. All right. You must also bring it. It's not a theory heavy standard. So there's not a lot of biomechanics or exercise physiology, but there is some theory that you should consider putting in. So, for example, I've talked about researching hypothermia, or not hypothermia, researching the risk. Okay, hypothermia could be replaced with any risk. Leadership theory, autocratic, laissez-faire, democratic leadership. Goal setting theory leading to arousal control theory. Communication theory, non-verbal versus verbal communication. Page 13 of the booklet, safety is not the same as comfort. There's a kind of a graph there that talks about the zone we want it to be in. Types of safety. Remember we talked about emotional, physical and cultural safety. Excuse me. And where you can, what is the connection? So for example, emotional safety will always affect physical safety, and physical safety will always affect emotional safety. Can you give me an example?
Probably when we were doing high ropes.
Correct. So give me elaborate on that.
Like when we were jumping off that thing and swinging, it was safe, but we were probably like your emotions were probably annoying. You were like, oh.
Cool. So your emotional safety, like you feel unsafe. When you're unsafe emotionally, are you going to be more positive with your physical movements or a little bit hesitant? Cool. So I felt it. You saw my feet going like that, right? Okay, so that was an example of me feeling like, shit, it feels like I'm actually falling here. And I've had a physical reaction, okay? All right? There was obviously no real outcome for that because I was in the air and that sort of stuff, but it was a good example of me feeling unsafe emotionally, and my physical reaction was uncontrollable. Likewise as well, if you are on a mountain bike, you feel a little bit unsafe when you're going down a hill, all right? Quite often the best way to do it is attack that hill. It doesn't feel right, but that's the best way to do it, because as soon as you're hesitant, your weight goes back, you're not in the best position to control your bike, or you put your foot down and then you end up with sort of a bit of a cross up of, you know what I mean? So that is an example of emotional affecting physical safety, all right? Who felt like that at some stage during that mountain bike where you kind of went over a hill and whoa, and you kind of went whoa? Okay, so that is a good example. Anyway, so that's the links. All right, now I don't think I'm missing anything else. Have you got any pātai that might help people on this video? Okay, cool.